In today's Procreate tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make this simple watercolor pumpkin. This is a beginner-friendly tutorial and I'll walk you through every single step. If you're interested, please keep on watching. Hello and welcome to Color with Kendi. For today's video, you'll need a few supplies. I have listed all of them in the pinned comment and the description. Let's get started. Okay, so for this tutorial, I'm using my Amazing Watercolor brush pack. So I'm going to open up the canvas that comes with the set. I'm going to swipe to the left first and duplicate it, and then open it up. So this is our game plan. We are going to start out by making a sketch of the pumpkin first, and then we will start coloring in the main part of the pumpkin, and we will add some fun effects on top, and then we will do the top part of the pumpkin as well as the leaves. So that's our game plan, so let's get into it. So first thing, I'm going to open up the layers panel and I'm going to sketch in this layer. So I'm just going to call it the sketch layer. And then I'm going to go to the brush library, go to the watercolor set. The Amazing Watercolor set is what I'm using today. And I'm going to make a sketch with the rough sketch brush. I'm using it at size 20, so that's kind of what the brush looks like. I'm going to consider making my pumpkin in the landscape orientation. Okay, so to draw the pumpkin, I like to start out with an oval. And this is a rough sketch, so we're just doing rough shapes. We will refine this later. So right now, just a rough shape. And then what I like to do is create a line there and a line there. So basically an oval, and then we've got 4 of these lines, 2 jutting out this way and 2 towards the bottom. And then we join them. And then we do the same thing again, another line here and another line here, closer to the top. And another line here, another line here. Then join these 2 as well. Okay. And then time to draw a few more lines like this. Then a segment here, or a line here, and then I'm going to draw some curves with some leaves coming off the side. Okay, so this is the rough sketch. We are going to refine it. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to tap on the transform tool. I'm going to move this towards the center. Make it a little bit bigger. And then I'm going to go to the layers panel. I'm going to tap on N to reduce the opacity. And now in another layer, I'm going to do a nicer version of the sketch. At this point, you can change the shape a little bit and make it look a little bit nicer if you'd like to. Right now, this was very rough, but now is the time to refine the shape. Okay, so this is the sketch. I feel like I want to change things up a little bit more. So what you can always do is go to the transform tool and then tap on warp. And you can always adjust things by stretching until you get something that you like. I'm happy with that, and now I'm ready to start coloring. For coloring, I'm not going to use the line art. I'm actually going to just use it as a guide. The line art will not be in the final version, so I'm just going to go to the layers panel and make sure that I have that sketch layer selected, and tap on N and reduce the opacity. I just need to see it to color, but I'm not going to use that line art. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this layer here, that sketch layer, and then create another layer right above it to start coloring. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Simple Watercolor Pigmented, tap on that brush, and then I'm going to select a color. In the color menu, I'm on disc mode. I'm going to select something that's not quite super orangey, something that's closer to the yellow hue. And then we're going to add more orangey elements to it. So test out this color. I like that. It's kind of yellow and orange mixed together. It's not a deep orange like that. Something around there. That's a good color to select. And what I'm going to do is I am going to start coloring in this segment then this segment and this segment. Basically, I don't want to color in two segments that are right next to each other. I want to color in segments that are not overlapping or not too close to each other. And you'll understand why in the next step. All right, so I'm just going to use this brush without lifting my pencil. I'm just going to color in the segment. And I'm not trying to make it a perfect oval because I want to retain that hand-done look. And just going to color it in, don't lift the pencil. Because if you lift the pencil and then lay down more pigment, you will get overlap. We don't want that right now. And now I'm going to color in, not this segment because it's right next to this one. I'm going to color in this one. Okay, the next step is to color in these two areas. And I'm going to do this in a different layer just so that I have more control. Whenever I have elements that could touch each other, especially when I'm doing a watercolor painting, I just generally like to do them in a separate layer because when I add the effects, it's a lot easier. It's not as messy. You could use exactly the same color, or if you want to change the hue just a touch, you can go into the slider and make it a little bit different. Just a notch more towards yellow, just a little bit. And I'm going to color in these segments. Okay, now we are going to start adding in some fun effects, the watercolor effects, and we're going to do this for each layer separately. So let's go to that bottom layer that we had, those 3 segments, tap on plus, and then create a clipping mask. So anything we do in this layer will show up on only the colored portion of the layer underneath. It won't go outside the bounds of it. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the color wheel and pick a more intense color. Not quite red, but like a very reddish orange. And then I'm going to go to the pigment bleed overlay brush and start to just tap towards the edge here. You can change the color a little bit. So basically just towards the edges. You can add as much color as you want. This would add quite a bit of color. It is totally up to you how much I'm just going to add more towards the bottom and a little less towards the top. I like that. And what I want to do is I want to go in with another brush as well to add a little bit more visual interest, the hard edge overlay brush. And I am going to go in with a very saturated orange. So this is quite saturated. You can choose something that's a little bit red as well. And then I'm going to create some of these hard edges. So do you see what's happening here? And then actually, let me show you how this brush works in another layer just so it's easier to see. So I'm going to create another layer just to show you how this brush works. So with heavy pressure, you get more pigment. And as you lighten the pressure, it actually removes some of the pigment. So you can create kind of these hard edges. And I like to do that with a clipping mask. So let me just delete this and go back to this layer and create some hard edges here by laying down the pigment and then lightening the pressure, just so it creates more of that watercolor effect. And you can do as much as you want or as little as you want. I'm happy with that. You can definitely add more. Then the other thing that I want to do is add just a little bit of visual interest with this grainy pigment overlay B brush. And I'm going to do this in a different layer because that way if I want to change it later on, I can. I'm going to make this new layer here a clipping mask as well. And just go in. I'm going to use a slightly reddish hue for this. And just in certain areas, just lightly tap the brush to create some of this grainy pigment effect. Okay, so now we're going to do the exact same thing with these 2 segments. So we're going to go to Layers panel, tap on those 2 segments, and then create a clipping mask and create some visual interest with these overlay brushes. So you can add as much pigment as you want. You can even change the color a little bit. So now this is totally up to you. So I am happy with the main part of the pumpkin. You can definitely play around with the brushes and add more effects if you'd like. But now I'm going to move on to this area of the pumpkin, and we're going to do that in green. So what I'm going to do is go to the layers panel, tap on plus, and select a color first. Let's see. So I want it to be green, but not a bright green, because this is an autumn illustration. So maybe something between the green and the yellow hue. Let's see, somewhere here. I'm going to go back to that brush that we used originally to paint in the base layers. Oops, wrong thing. So the simple watercolor brush, and just test it out. I think that's a nice color. You can definitely go darker if you'd like. So I'm going to start coloring it in, and I'm trying to avoid lifting my pencil to avoid any overlap. Okay, the next step, you guessed it, we're going to add some fun effects. So go to the layers panel, add a new layer, clipping mask. And what we're going to do is we are going to go a little bit darker and maybe a little bit more towards yellow, just to change things up. And I am going to use the hard edge overlay B brush, just to change things up. And I'm going to add more pigment towards the bottom, and I am changing the pressure. So light pressure in some areas and heavy pressure in others. Maybe I'll go even a little bit darker towards brown and just add some color on one side. I'm going to do the same thing with the leaves, but for the leaves, I don't want them to be brown. So I'm going to go back towards green, maybe a little bit brighter. Actually, I don't know. You have to experiment. I find that this is all about experimenting and getting the right color that you like. So some areas, I make them darker, just so that there's some visual interest. Okay, I'm happy with that. I can definitely add some more texture. So let's see, I'm going to do it with the grainy pigment overlay brush. And I'm going to do this in another layer. Again, clipping mask. Very simple process, really. It's about creating clipping masks. And then I'll add some. Actually, let me zoom in so you can see what this brush does. I have to zoom in. It adds a little bit of that grainy texture. So I'm going to add a little bit of that, just to make it a little bit more visually interesting. All right, now the next step, add another layer, and I'm going to color in these two segments here. Or I can actually leave them out. So let me turn off that traceable. I might just leave them out. I think the pumpkin looks fine as is. What I do want to do is add a few darker lines here to indicate that each segment is different. Right now, it's hard to see. There's not enough visual contrast. So at this point, what I'm going to do is in this new layer, I'm going to go in with the dual color toothy detail brush and start to add some detail lines for contrast. And I'm going to select the color here. And this is a dual color brush, so you're going to have to select both the colors. So I'm going to go in with a darker version of that color. And then for the second color, just tap on it, and I'm going to go in with an orange. So I've got these two colors for this dual color brush. So with this brush, if you apply low pressure, you get this kind of look, like a dry look. But if you apply high pressure, it looks like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check if there's enough contrast here. No, I can go a little bit darker. So I'm going to go a tad darker. Yes. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add some lines to add a little bit of contrast. And then I'm going to add lines here. So I'm going to do this in the same layer. You can do this in a different layer. So I'm going to grab this color right here and then go down at an angle, make it darker. And then for the second color, I'm also going to select a green, maybe with a little bit of a yellow hue. Let's see if there's enough contrast. I think it needs to be a tad darker. So I'm going to make that color a tad darker. I think that will give me enough contrast. And then I'm just going to create some lines here. Okay, the next step, I want to add a few very, very mild highlights to the pumpkin. So I'm going to do that in a different layer. I'm going to select pure white by double tapping at the 10 o'clock position in the color wheel. And then I'm going to go to this ink bleed detail liner, and I'm going to zoom in and create some highlights. Now that looks a little too intense. We are going to change the opacity in a bit. Oops, let's just do that. Okay, you can leave that as is, or you can go into the layers panel and tap on N and reduce the opacity just a notch. I'm gonna go to around 76. All right, now I do want to make a few minor adjustments. I want to make the bottom of the pumpkin a little bit darker, just a touch. So I'm going to go back to the layers panel and I'm going to go right here. So remember I had this layer where I colored in 3 segments and I had a few clipping masks. So I'm going to tap on top of the topmost clipping mask and create another clipping mask. And I want to add a little bit of darkness. I'm going to grab this color and then go down at a diagonal, and with this pigment bleed overlay brush, just add a touch of darkness towards the bottom. Just a touch. Not too much. Okay, the next step, I'm going to add a little bit of a shadow towards the bottom. So I'm going to do that in a different layer. Tap on plus and add a new layer. And then I'm going to select a gray, kind of a light gray. And then I'm going to go to the toothy pencil and just very gently, I think that might be too intense. So go a little bit lighter on the color wheel. Very gently, just create a little bit of a shadow. And what I want to do is actually move this layer towards the bottom, right here. So there's a very, very faint shadow. You can add a little bit more of a shadow if you'd like to. So that's kind of what that looks like. I like things to remain a bit subtle, but I do want to add a touch of darkness right here with this brush, like that. Okay, and now the final piece, I'm going to add some splatter. So I'm going to go up at the top where we had the highlights and then add another layer. And then I'm going to go to paint splatter. It's the brush right at the bottom. And I'm going to select, let's see, maybe this color right here. Select any color that you want, something that is in your painting, and test out the brush. If you vary the pressure, you will get splatters of different sizes. If you use low pressure, they're all going to be teeny tiny. So what I'm going to do is zoom in to one side and then just create splatters of varying sizes. And I'm also going to go in a little bit darker and create a few more splatters. So that is it for today. I just wanted to zoom in and show you all of the fun textures that we have added to our illustration today. And you can definitely change things up if you'd like. You can go back to some of the layers and try it again with different brushes and see what you create. It's all about experimenting and having fun. So now that you know the process, which is to lay down the base color and then add clipping masks on top, you can create anything with this particular style. So let me know if you have any questions below, and if you did create this and you'd like to share it, please do tag me on Instagram at Color with Kendi, and I will check it out. I would love to see your work. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.